Hello, 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 and welcome to this week's episode of the Imaginary Movie Podcast, a podcast where we watch a movie and then we talk about it. My name's David, and the Academy Award for the best podcast goes to somebody else.
My name's Sam. My name's Sam, and welcome to Late Stage Capitalism.
And I'm Ross, and I'm a firm believer now of Eat the Rich.
Yes. If you're under any illusions, this is a vehemently left-wing podcast.
Get the fuck out of here, man.
Yeah,
You're
this is
channel.
it. This is
go
what
elsewhere,
we're
go elsewhere.
Listen. It's not right and left. It's right and wrong.
Left and wrong?
Left and wrong?
Left and wrong. Just moral and immoral. How about that? Just
Right.
Okay. Is Ross a conservative sleeper agent? Is that just like coming out?
I'm slowly morphing into Alex Jones. They're turning the frog water gay.
This is
In contrast to all of that, we are not doing a political show about politics. We're doing a political show about a movie. And that movie is Nomadland from last year, which just recently, if you follow it at all, just won the Academy Award for Best Picture, which means a bunch of rich old white men liked it or were otherwise financially, economically, or blackmailed into choosing it.
Yeah, this is like our Oscars special. As special as it can be, I suppose. But I think this came out of it's not in our rotation, but I think it's a good one to do, and it's like an interesting film to talk about and get into and destroy and have lots of fun talking about the death of capitalism, which we hope will be soon. We hope, please.
Well, before the death of everyone in the system, really would be best.
Yeah. So
no promises, though.
No.
But let's talk a little bit around the Academy Awards, because obviously not everyone's a massive film buff. Not everyone gives a shit. I'm certain there must be a lot of people out there who don't know that the Oscars are the Academy Awards because, those two seem fairly interchangeable.
Can I ask a question to kick us off? Has anyone ever sat down and watched the Oscars live? Have you ever done that, either of you?
God, no.
No. I have talked with a group of friends in Leeds. We did talk about doing it one year, but all the nominees were shite. So we were like,
it's terrible. Me and Nicola did it once. We were like, we like films. Like It is the most boring television that I think I've ever watched in my life because it is literally just loads of waiting around, occasional speeches.
I think I'd rather watch the NFL draft, Sam.
It's not far off that.
Here's the thing, though, and that's from you as a spectator. Imagine being there, and when you're not going to win, and you're like, "Oh God!"
You're forgetting one thing. I bet nobody's sober at these events, Ross. You're going to put on a nice suit. You get to go to an event. You have a meal. You get a bit lit. You sit and you clap and you cheer, and that actually will probably be all right.
And they have seat fillers. They have seat fillers. People dressed up in fancy outfits who are just random Joes who go in and fill seats while the real celebrities...
You're right, Sam. That's much more achievable for the three of us.
Go to the bar. Even then, I think it would be...
then, we aren't good looking enough for that.
Yeah, but the Academy Awards is like, it's one of those things that it's one of the longest running Academy. I think we're 93 years or something, which is pretty intense in itself. It is prestigious, isn't it? Like it is a big deal to win an Oscar, and as much as I think we're going to shit all over it in the next 35 seconds, I think there is a lot of credit to win an Oscar, especially Best Director, especially Best Picture, and Best Actress, which this film has managed to achieve. But yeah, I've got a fact here. I think it's in 2012. The Academy, which is actors and people involved in making the movie themselves, 94% white and 77% male. So, unless it's improved dramatically in the last
Rich white men,
years,
things are still pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So
we're all right. We're all right.
We're not rich though, so I mean, I think we only tick one of those things off the list.
Yeah, we're not okay,
rich
Sam.
in
Obviously,
character, Sam.
We never pretended we were okay. Yeah, rich in life experience. Fucking what'll that buy me?
Your own podcast.
my own podcast because that's free. Except, well, never mind. So the Oscars are kind of like the Academy Awards are. They're really like headliney thing in my view. Like there are lots of Academy Awards that nobody could give two fucks about. And if you like fancy going on a Wikipedia dive, there's loads of like, oh, the Academy Award for, like sound and for effects and for makeup artists and things like that. Like they all exist. No one can give a fuck, obviously, because it's all just about that best picture, best actor, best actress, and best director are like, they're the big marquee titles. And so this movie, having won best director, best actress, and best picture, is kind of like it's quite a big movie in that respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it does represent like this film probably represents a different type of Oscar winner. If we go back to the early 2000s when we've got films like Gladiator, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, The Departed.
Can you imagine a Russell Crowe fucking muscle movie winning the best picture? Can you imagine?
So we have moved on, maybe? I don't know, but
things have changed though, because the best picture used to be like an absolute blockbuster. Like Titanic is a big like looming best picture that's made all the money in the world, and Gladiator is a huge movie, and quite a lot of old Oscar winners would like be the biggest movie. And I think there's like a rejection of that in the Academy for whatever reason, probably to disguise the fact that it's still a bunch of rich old white men telling everyone what they should like.
But it's what we discussed, before we started broadcasting, Dave, and I was going to bring this up later, but might as well say it now, in that the Oscars, they're supposed to be this massive prestigious thing, but the process of having your project, your movie, considered for an Oscar in whatever category, there's so like much under the table, underhanded practices that go on, like being certain monies, although it's not monies, it's gifts, and it's always for your consideration.
It's not as clean as bribery. That would be really above board for the Academy.
At least be honest with your cheating.
And then I'll hide these sex crimes. You hide these money crimes. We're all friends. We're all fine.
Exactly. And then it's or as lavish gifts, or just things like that there. And for me, like whatever, you're going to cheat, whatever. But then it detracts from movies that genuinely deserve this. So you mentioned Gladiator, and I can just. I have no proof for this, but I can just picture, the PR team behind Gladiator, creating these press kits and these gifts for the Oscars, for your consideration, of course. No promises are made, but just to be considered. And then, you move away from that stuff, and then you have movies like this. And the point I'm getting across is it detracts from movies that deserve it, that deserve this, the recognition and adoration.
Well, it's the ever-moving goalpost, and especially it feels like in the last 5 or 6 years, every movie that's won the Best Picture probably since... Did Mad Max Fury Road win the Best Picture? Sam, you can look that up on your list. Maybe that's the exception, no. But like every Oscar winner for the last 4 or 5 years seems to be like Oscar fodder is the word I use for it.
Parasite.
Like Oscar bait.
Parasite last year, Green Book, Shape of Water, Moonlight, Spotlight, Birdman, 12 Years a Slave, as we get back to Argo, weirdly, which is a fine film, I guess. But anyway, it's like, again, the movies seem to be like made with the intention of we're going to go out and win an Oscar, not like it seems like it used to be in the 80s and the 90s. We're going to go and make a movie and make loads of money because ultimately it's a capitalist system and the film industry is about making money. This movie, though, cost $5-6 million to make and made 5.8. Like, there's no intention to make money there. This movie was made to win an Oscar, which it achieved. But like, I think it's a wee bit cynical. I think it's a wee bit cynical. But
Sam, you know where we are, right?
Yeah, but
it's our podcast.
But if we're arguing that your Gladiators were unworthy winners, perhaps. Maybe, in terms of like the big budget things, imagine an Avengers movie, imagine a Marvel movie winning an Oscar for Best Picture now. It would just be fucking insane. But at least we are seeing movies like this and movies that are about exploring deeper things, if not necessarily, the plumbing the true depths that we need to, which we'll get to. But so I think this is a positive direction. That films that you wouldn't necessarily have gone to see in a cinema because who the hell was airing this? Never mind the pandemic, or in theaters. I think that's positive, and we get to explore some new ideas and new things, and we get to have different representative, folks. We've got Chloe Zhao who directed this, who's from China. I think one of the very few Asian women to win an Oscar overall. So I think that's positive. That's positive. That's the right direction.
Absolutely, Sam. And just to clarify, I'm not outright stating that Gladiator shouldn't have won it, but I'm saying the shady practices that go on with.
Please don't come and beat Ross up. Please.
Oh, I'll take him any day.
Ross,
come at me, bro.
Russell Crowe will rip your face off.
No. Anyway, but I was just saying that because of the shady practices that goes on, for me, it casts doubt on whether any project is deserving. And I think what Dave was saying, and if I'm mistaken, Dave, correct me, but I do agree with you, is that there are certain movies, and you could make the argument for this movie, is that they're made purely for the end goal being winning an Oscar, not making a wonderful sort of piece of cinema, and then because of that, then you're nominated because you've done such a great thing. Yeah. The end goal is Oscar, and I think that's what Dave was saying.
Well, to expand on that further, just briefly, and I realise we've been on this for a while, so we'll move on shortly. But there are three reasons you make a movie. You either want to make money, you want to win awards, so you want to win Oscars, you want to make a splash, you want to sort of get the prestige, like this movie, of making an Oscar-winning movie. And the third one, which almost never happens, is you have an artistic vision that you want to execute, which almost never happens because the first two usually take precedence. And this movie definitely sits in the to win an Oscar. Gladiator, I would say, definitely sits in the to make money, along with most big tentpole films. And it can be all three. I think a film like maybe the Titanic I mentioned earlier is maybe an example of all three. James Cameron really, really wanted to make that movie. He had an artistic vision. It also wanted to make loads of money because he spent hundreds of millions of dollars on it. And obviously they wanted to win awards but I think that's quite a rare thing in movies.
Well, let's get into this film then. So in Nomadland, we've got a woman in her 60s who, after losing everything in the Great Recession, embarks on a journey through the American West, living as a van-dwelling modern-day nomad. Frances McDormand is the titular nomad, and it's kind of it's a film about her, isn't it, principally? And it's her and the kind of characters that revolve around her and kind of share in her experiences. And I think it is a film that fits into your third category there, Dave. That this is about a real a rather pure vision. I don't think this is trying to make money at all, and I think it's a very, very deliberate filmmaking. It's full of lots of interesting ideas, well done, and I think that you have to kind of respect that in relation to managing to win an Oscar for a movie like this, where we get a heck of a lot of just shots of landscapes, and that's it. And that's kind of enough to nourish you as a viewer. So I think I would say this is worthy of an Oscar, and we should maybe get into some of the details now, but it seems to be a worthy winner to me.
It would have been nice if we'd watched any of the other nominees this year, but I haven't.
Who has? This was on Disney Plus. It's the only reason we're doing this.
Well, yeah, they haven't sponsored this podcast, so
And this is the trouble.
If you want our adoration,
this is the trouble. Pay us for one. Exactly. This is the trouble with the Oscars. Is I would never be interested in staying up to watch it because I think the most. One year by accident I watched 3 of the nominees before the Oscars, just because I must have gone to the cinema quite a lot, but to watch all 5 movies, and some of them that don't even come to the cinema as well, it's quite impossible to, within a reasonable budget, see all of these movies and then also be interested enough to watch the Oscars. And it's kind of
Yeah.
like, it's a big ask,
So what,
especially
Ross,
when they're an hour and 47 minutes long.
yeah, Ross, very, very, very briefly, what did you think of this?
Well, before I watched it, I was cursing you, Sam. I was like, God damn it, this art house, fluffy, duffy, garbage sort of.
Such a Philistine.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, what a fucking bleeding
This doesn't
heart.
star Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger. What's this about?
Guys,
Oh, my
no
muscly,
Jean-Claude
oily
Van
men
Damme,
from the
so
80s.
ergo no splits. I'm not sure what's going on here.
This
No, but,
film could
yeah.
have done with more Van Damme, I'll give you that.
So putting it lightly, I did have my doubts, but I'm genuinely, and I'm not just saying this for whatever reason, but I'm genuinely glad I watched it because number one, it is it is an experience to watch, and I don't know if "enjoy" is the right word, but I don't know a better word for watching it, for describing it. But I did enjoy watching it, and it did evoke something in me, and it hit in the heart in a couple of points. What I want to go up with saying though is, I just think it just missed the mark for me. It could have done something really good here and made some poignant sort of points. It could have hit a much stronger message for me. And I think that's where it just missed the mark.
Okay, Dave, you very quickly.
Very quickly. I actually agree with you, like broadly on every point you made there, Ross. This movie is, I don't know if I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed the experience of it. Like, I think is the best way of describing it. Like,
yep.
This is a good movie. After I really didn't like the first half an hour, 40 minutes, it really didn't grab me. So I was a bit like you. I was like, why are we doing this? Can't we just watch another Pirates of the Caribbean movie? My fucking lord.
I haven't seen Schwarzenegger hang dong in so long.
I haven't seen butt cheek in days. But after that, this is a road movie. It's really visually arresting. And it's kind of fun to watch just for that. And I also, me, like, once you're into it, it kind of grabbed me, and like, this isn't a linear story. There aren't the story beats you would expect in a movie. And I kind of enjoyed that. This movie just kind of ends, like when it decides it's going to end. And I really like the non-linear way that it does that. It's kind of like it's there to do what it's going to do, and then it's done with it. It's gone. So like, I'll probably never watch it again, but I don't regret watching it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where I think, as a starting point, then, because I think this film is kind of like, it's about exploring the kind of the big issues that people have faced over the last, say, decade, or a bit longer than that, in terms of the Great Recession and like the impact of lack of work and like precarious economy and all these other things. So when you say you enjoy it, it's like, it's like interesting to watch, but it doesn't necessarily kind of reach much further than that for me. A good starting point is maybe the Amazon thing, because this is in the first 20 minutes of the movie. This isn't, and I think this is where we get all political. But let's just maybe touch on that.
State before you get into this, just because I feel like I won't be speaking much here. That I don't necessarily agree that this movie is worse for not being really, really, really political. And I'm sure you can disagree with me, and that's fine. I just want to get this out of the way first. And the Amazon thing especially, I think this movie is telling a story it wants to tell, and that's just that. I don't think it's necessarily kowtowing to corporations.
That's a valid point, Dave. However, I would make
there's going to be a.
However, go fuck yourself. No. However, what I will say is they could have done that and not give Amazon the free advertising like they need it, big sort of thing, and show all these employees that are happy working there. They could have done that without showing Amazon at all and still told the same story.
So hold on. Are happy working there? Though?
Yeah. Hold on, because I'm not necessarily even talking about that. I'm talking about the Amazon. The bit, the Amazon bit represents, I think, one of the central planks of the film, which is like, this movie is about precarious work. It's about the inability for people to be able to meet their basic needs because of economic systems and like the inability for, as a society and culture and whatever else, to hold down jobs and keep them in a way that helps people be secure. This runs throughout the entire movie. The Amazon bit is like the biggest, glaring, most kind of bizarre choice to include them in the movie. I agree with you, Ross. I don't understand why they're there. I think just have like a fake fulfillment center that everyone knows is Amazon. That's fine. But I think what's important is that this is one of the central parts of the film, is the fact that she spends all of her time driving around and basically traveling for
part-time
work.
gigs.
Yeah, she goes to the potato farm or whatever it is later on.
Racist.
How? Anyway, she goes to the potato farm later on.
Against sugar beets, which is what this is.
Sugar beets.
Beets.
It was sugar beets, yeah.
Right, so she's cleaning potatoes, whatever she's doing over there.
It's not
So
potatoes.
that's part of
For
the
the
work.
last time.
She's doing weird odd jobs and all these other things to try and make ends meet. And so all throughout the movie, we get this like sense of precarity and this sense of, you know, as I mentioned, this is late stage capitalism. This is like a inevitable point where it feels like we're watching a Western. It feels like we're watching the experience of somebody in like the 19th century, you know, in terms of absolutely no social system and everyone's on their own. There's one guy who looks like a fucking cowboy, which we can speak
Derek.
about. And yet we have Amazon in there with their logo and everything's great. And the only thing, you know, the comment that gets made about Amazon, oh, the pay's good. You know, there's no point where they kind of touch on like, well, actually, why are these companies allowed to provide basically this type of work, which only gives people the surety to not even to live in a van and not even have a house. And there's all this, but the film doesn't really want to go there, like you say, Dave.
No,
it's kind of a fair point, though, isn't it? You know, like maybe the film should. Maybe this is pulling its punches.
absolutely, absolutely.
I can't agree with you. I see what you're saying, but like what you're describing is a different movie. In my opinion, the reason Amazon is in this is because culturally, in 2021, we recognize Amazon as this monolithic corporation. When we see the Amazon logo, we see her scanning things and packing things. The movie doesn't need to explain what she's doing. It doesn't need to explain why she's got this job in a factory and why she won't have it in a couple of months. You're shaking your head and disagreeing with me, Sam, but what I'm saying isn't not valid. What I'm saying is, I think that's the reason to have Amazon in here. And take, you know, it's fine to think differently, but I don't think that then the movie needs to be about why Amazon is bad and why corporations are bad, which they are. But like, it's a factor in this woman's life. It's like the campsite she works on later on. It's just like it's a seasonal job that would be recognizable to like a vast number of especially Americans. And I think that maybe it's a cultural touchstone in that way, rather than being like hey, look, aren't Amazon great? Because I don't think that it paints them in a positive or negative light.
And I absolutely, Dave, and I think that's the problem, because it's especially given how much we've known recently. I mean, it was in the news quite recently that, you know, the first Amazon, and this is sort of going off on a tangent, but the first Amazon warehouse, whatever the hell it's called, recently just got unionized workers. And now, I don't know through what algorithms I'm getting them, but I'm now getting anti-unionist adverts on Twitter on my accounts somehow. And basically, you know, say, oh, you don't need a union, all that there. And like, it's just alarm bells. When a corporation tells you you don't need a union, you need a union.
Yeah.
And I basically, sorry, Sam, just to jump in, and I completely agree, Dave, like that it doesn't do a positive or negative. However, what I would argue is, if you're going to go to the length to show the massive company logo, people going in, doing the packaging, show the full thing, show what, you know, what conditions employees have to do, you know, when they have to take a piss in a bag to keep up productivity. Yeah. When you have a CEO who literally makes tens of thousands of dollars per minute every day, you gotta take a better punch than that. And if they don't let you, then make up a company and do the thing. I just think it's a wasted opportunity.
It is, and like don't have Amazon in it. Have a normal,
Yep.
have a regular, or pretend fulfillment center, or don't have that scene at all.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not going to focus on that, and I think if you make that choice as a movie and say we're not touching this, because the second plank, which we'll come to in a moment, if that's all right, is very different and very very legitimate. If you're not going to have the commentary about the role of mega corporations, the role of people like Jeff Bezos, like, don't take us to the poverty factory. Like, don't take us. Don't take us to the point, the place where people can't.
Where the sausage gets made.
Yeah, I have a massive zoom lens on all of the deprivation that exists because of these companies, because of the lack of healthcare that they provide in America and all unethical practices. Now, I'm going to be, as I was watching this, literally as I was watching this, I got a knock on the door, and who delivered a package for me, which was Amazon. So, like, there is no ethical consumption, and whichever
Amazon,
way you
pay us,
yeah. Whichever way you spin it, I think that you kind of, everyone has a choice to make, don't they, as individuals and as filmmakers, and I think that they failed to make a choice in this because they
made their choice and they chose, in my opinion, the coward's path.
They chose poorly. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So the second part of this, then, the second theme I think throughout this movie is, and I remember the first one about Amazon and precarity of work, like, they don't really want to touch it. They hint at it. They drag it along behind the vans. The ragged carcass of the idea about the capitalism is failing. They kind of, like, it's there, but it's not really talked about.
Can I just say, that is what you're saying is fine, but it's part of the, I want to say world building, but it's part of the reason that these people are in this situation. But it's never, this isn't a self-pitying movie. This isn't a movie about, like, look what don't get me wrong, this isn't a movie where Fern, the main character, goes around saying, isn't my life horrible because capitalism's done this to me? Because that is not what the movie's trying to do. The theme of the movie is not capitalism is evil and it's ruined everyone's lives, which it is and it has.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm saying, like, isn't Amazon a horrible thing that you want to put in? You would have had in this movie. It would just, I think, jar perhaps with the rest of what the movie's trying to get across.
What I would say, though, and to be clearer, the second plank of this movie is about the resilience and community that exists, that, in the environment that you're describing as a neutral canvas. If that makes any sense at all, so you've got this kind of neutral take on that they have to say about capitalism and about the economic systems that we exist, and about the lack of social care, benefits and all the other things. They've got that there, and so the main thrust of the movie is about the goodness. Chloe Zhao, when she won the Oscar, her speech, she talked about always there's the kind of goodness in people, and there's always goodness in people out there, and we should cherish that and we should support that. So that's great, that's brilliant, and that's what we'll talk about next, and we can maybe finish on this point. But you can't also ignore the reason why it exists. It exists, yeah. Why people need to be
you can
no,
because it's the movie.
But
it's irresponsible.
What I'm saying is it's totally fair for you to say, right, they didn't want to touch that. I think that's a poor choice. I think it's a choice that reneges on a responsibility of filmmakers to profile and to highlight the issues that are out there. If you're going to make a movie like this and you're not going to make the Avengers, you're going to go for the Oscar bait, you better have the
chops to back it up. You better,
or even
the integrity.
Just the sense of responsibility that you to have the Amazon logo plastered all over the start of this movie, when later on people are shitting in buckets, whether out of choice or not, because they haven't got housing. Like, I think there's a disparity there, and I think
it's worth noting. I think it's worth noting, Sam, when you asked me what I thought about the movie, like, there was a couple of things that really hit home for me, and I'm lucky enough to be in a position where I'm in sort of somewhat secure in employment. But this was one of the points that really hit me, and like Amy saw my face. What's wrong with you? I was like, my blood's boiling. I was like, I didn't expect this. And again, it's like when you have a corporation like that, and then people who are that close to the breadline, and it's not even explored, and like, you know, and for me, I'm piecing things together myself, which I shouldn't be, because it's not the story that they're going out to tell. But there was one or two other things that evoked, you know, a certain like emotional response from me, and I'll get to that in a second.
Well, so this second plank of the movie, which is about, again, it's about the community that exists living in vans, and that's like, it's really interesting. And the idea of like a modern day nomad, largely a lot of these people are doing it out of choice. You know, there are people who are like advocating for it. There's the guy Bob Wells, I think, who's again real person. We haven't got that many actors in this film. Most of the time, it's real people, and Bob's talking about how there's this movement where we want to throw off the shackles of oppression that is owning a house and all these other things, because we can drive around, you know, and have that freedom. And that's, I think this is fascinating. It's fascinating. It's warm, and all of the people we meet along the way bring such a depth of experience, because again, most of these people are just the real people who did this, you know, who were actually out there living in this way. And I think that part of the movie is beautiful. I think the relationship between characters and the way that they're able to like bring together this this sense of community that exists, even though they don't live next to each other, I think is wonderful. And that's a real credit to the film to be able to capture that, you know.
And now you talk.
What's going on?
Yeah. Well, no, I was just waiting for, basically, I was mulling over whether it was right to sort of segue into the thing I was going to mention, which was, like you mentioned, that sort of sense of community, Sam, and some of the sort of relationships that Fern develops throughout this. And forgive me now, because I can't remember her name, but this was the lady who first introduced her to Bob Wells. And basically, you know, they were having a conversation.
Is it Linda May, the one who works at Amazon? Yeah.
Yes. And basically, and they were getting to know each other. And you see this scene, and I'm probably crowbarring it in now, but they were having this conversation, and basically Linda was explaining to Fern how she got in this situation, and she was basically saying, you know, that, you know, people got sick, her husband got sick, and then basically she goes to Social Security and she had like $550. And I just feel like you're absolutely right, Sam, that there's this sense of community. And for some people who opt for that lifestyle, but then there's people who go to that lifestyle because they have no other choice. And again, this goes back to what we were just discussing, and this is what evoked that response to me when you put it succinctly, Sam, in the text message, the richest country in the world, and they can't look after people who've literally worked since the age of 12. That's what, again, my blood boiled. And I was like, how can we do this where we don't even look after people? And then I was even thinking, like, it's similar in the UK. Do you know what I mean? You have nurses, like employed nurses for the NHS, going to food banks. And then you have politicians saying, oh, well, it's not all. Like, I'm going off on a tangent here, but it's a common thread throughout every flipping, you know, somewhat, you know, supposed thriving country, and we can't even look after people who have or are currently contributing to society, and it's disgusting. And that's where it comes back to, again, Dave, apologies, don't mean to drill down it, but that's where it comes back to the likes of companies like that, the likes of CEOs like Jeff Bezos. They pay damn all in tax, but then it's the everyday people like us who have to pick up after and wipe their arses.
Yeah, for sure. Like there was certainly an aspect of that in this movie. Like you said, though, they don't really. And again, I don't want to get into an argument here because obviously I'm disagreed with. But like the movie doesn't want to explore those things. Like, and I'm not trying to say that's good or bad. I'm just saying like it's all there on the table. But the movie, like, because the Fern character, we haven't really mentioned the Fern character. She lives in a van because she lived in this mining town. She worked at the mine, I think.
Empire, wasn't it?
Empire, yeah. Which I think is a real place. I'm not entirely sure. And basically, the mine or the plant closed, and because it was the only show in town as it was, like the town basically went away. And I think I was reading that the government has like they've taken the zip code off the system.
They discontinued it. Yeah,
nobody lives there anymore, and I think that's quite shocking, isn't it? That you could like, and America is very different, and obviously in the UK we live on every square inch of soil because there's a lot of us and not a lot of space. But in the US you can have like whole towns that are in the middle of a desert that like rely so heavily on something like that. And we're told all of this like kind of like secondhand mostly, and we get a lot of it sort of teased out throughout the movie that she lives in a van and she travels because in the market crash 2008, all these old people, older people suddenly found that they couldn't afford to retire because all of their retirement funds tanked. So that's kind of like the thought here, is that all these older people, sort of people who were maybe 10, 15 years away from retirement, suddenly found themselves without the financial security that people their age have. Now, as an aside, obviously we're fucked because there'll be no retirement when we get there. But so these people took to living in vans, and I refer to Fern, the character in this movie. She's the working poor. She doesn't suffer from a disability or anything. She's not unable to work. She's quite willing to work, but she's older. She's a lot less employable than someone younger. And she can't afford, she doesn't own a house or anything. So she's forced to live in this van and to travel around and find work where she can get it. I think pretty much all the jobs we see her have in this movie are all like, it's all seasonal work. So you've got the Amazon warehouse.
Is this the gig economy? Is this, because I've heard it
totally.
This is the gig economy, so.
Totally, but usually the gig economy is the word we use for people in their 20s because it's nicer. It's nicer for us to say gig economy when we're talking about young people. It's like, oh, they're young, they'll be fine. They've got years ahead of them,
work, isn't it? That's
but when it's older people, it's seasonal employment. I've worked with, as a sidebar, like I've worked with people who, when I used to work in retail.
So I think we're having some technical difficulties there.
That they can't afford to not work, so they'll take part-time work in a shop, bloody, working on a till, which is just soul crushing. You're talking to somebody who was a fireman for 40 years, but they're having to bloody pack someone shopping because they can't afford to make ends meet. And like you said, like it's a real like society's let people down. But to get back to the movie, like it's kind of. We see all of it. It shows us all of it, but it's not exploring those themes because this is kind of just a show and tell movie. It's quite shallow in that way. Like it's very visually impressive and like it's very well made and emotionally evocative, but ultimately it's not really got anything to say other than maybe the nobility of the working poor. But I don't know what you guys think on that.
No, I think that's a very accurate sort of observation because, it, like you say, it shows you all this thing, but you don't really get the gist of what they're trying to tell you. I will say, like I think you mentioned, David, it is incredibly evocative, and like there are some sad stories. I mean, that other character, Fern befriends the one who's basically got 7-8 months to live.
Swanky.
No, I thought, isn't Swanky the male sort of interest?
Nope.
That's Dave.
Oh, I thought he was called Swanky. Anywho, sorry.
Did you watch the right movie, Ross?
Maybe not. But it's seeing these people, these sort of short stories, and you can you can sort of tell, from the offset, as soon as you hear 7-8 months, oh, she ain't gonna last long. But I don't know if you guys remember this, but they were connecting somewhat, and she was giving away some furniture, and then just one morning you see the scene of Swanky driving away, and for some reason like that hits because I was just thinking like, how lonely is this life? You're driving point A to point B to C for XYZ job, and like I thought the movie was going to go in a different direction when they first met Bob and the RV sort of group. And then she hangs with them for a bit, and then she's off again. And I don't think I could take that much isolation.
Yeah. Well,
You do get
let's.
moments of that, moments of introspection. Like one for me is when she's eating in the van, she's eating chicken or something, and they kind of again like the movie touches on it, but never really like goes full thought. Is Bob, the main guy, is explaining to them about living in vans and about how to get around. Like the US is quite like it's not geared up for you to be able to live in a van. They don't like it. So like she gets, she's hiding in the van and someone's knocking on the door saying you can't park here, you can't sleep here. This is overnight parking. It's not exactly like, and she's scared that she's going to be. Do you know what I mean? And that hit me maybe more than even the swanky scene, Ross, of like, wow, this woman is kind of like living in fear and she's been forced to live in fear, and she's not, like you said, she's not a criminal, she's not a bad person, she's trying to like make a living, and that's kind of depressing, isn't it?
It goes to the point of like, so we've got Bob Wells, we've got all these people who are having like seminars about how to do this thing. One woman lives in a Prius, which seems mad, but whatever. And I think that's cool. And like the movie, and in the end, we end the movie with Bob Wells with a very, very touching, again, real person, just presumably speaking to his experience. We end the movie with a touching speech about how the nobility of living like this. But what I find is like discordant is the fact that Fern clearly is not particularly happy in this situation. Now I know at the end of the movie she chooses and drives off from Dave and his family and the offer to stay in a house. But all throughout, we see her not really like being particularly happy with the way that she has to live. Her tire, when her tire goes, she's incredibly frustrated by the whole situation. That scene you mentioned, Dave, about when she gets banged on the door. So there's like all these things, and it I think it goes to like Fern's character as being someone who is, quite deeply unhappy in a lot of ways. And I think that obviously the loss of her husband and loss of that stable life that she had seems to have like brought up quite a lot for her, and I really love the moments when you get to see her and the acting, which let's have a moment to, in a minute to talk about McDormand. The bit when she's watching a crocodile getting fed, and like you see this like hyperactive, like giddy, like almost childlike side to her. And that's kind of the only time you get to see that, and that's when she's with Dave. And the rest of the time she's incredibly sedate. Even saying thank you to people, she's like, thanks. She's not particularly kind of outward facing. And I think there's a lot that ties in with the fact that she has to live like this, and she doesn't seem particularly kind of happy with that from my point of view.
Absolutely, and I at times struggled to understand her, because there was one scene where she gets car trouble, and takes it to the garage, and basically the cost of the charge to fix it was half of what the car was worth, and they were recommending you should trade it in. And she goes, well, no, because I've made modifications, I've lived in it, it's set out, which makes sense. But I just, and she calls her sister for a loan, and she has to go out to see her sister in order to get the money from her. And while that's happening, I couldn't help but think, I get this emotional attachment to it. You've done it yourself. But the practical side of me is also thinking, but like this van is aging. These problems are only going to get worse, and the costs are going to get higher. You don't have the money to fix it now. And like this is what I'm like, like in a practical sense, like, no, this is the wrong decision. What you're doing.
But I think that's like,
Swanky
that's us. That's like, us as, and this is where this movie maybe like does say something. It's Fern's like rejection of that. Like they call themselves houseless people, not homeless people, but houseless people.
Yeah,
and like especially in this country where like you guys are homeowners, but I'm not, and like. I see home ownership, no offense, guys, as this total fucking racket that like sucks you in, and then you're like bought into the system. Then you are like, do you know what I mean? You cannot afford for the housing market to be fixed because you're like everything, all of your like assets are tied up in it. And that is so destructive. And so Fern's rejection when she tells her sister, she says, she's, I don't ever want to sleep in a house again. Like, because I think that that's her maybe coming to the realization that she has not. It's not even it's the van that she loves, Ross. It's her home. It's the place where she feels safe. It's the place where she feels comfortable. It's the place that gets her around, and she's like gives her the freedom which she maybe needed after her husband died. And so like that rejection of, and twice actually, that rejection of like, come and live with us and it'll all be okay, and like no, and that I think maybe that American streak of like that individualism, like no, I'm going to be out there, I'm going to be, this is me in my van. And so I don't think there is an end game, and I think that you're seeing that because like for you, like that's all tied up in, your house and your family and all of that on a much more deeper emotional level, whereas all this woman has is this van and the ability to go and work and move around and keep doing that.
But does she not seem miserable to you? That's because I agree with you. I agree with you, and I don't think either of us are wrong. I think the film is saying that because she rejects the ownership. I think it's a good point about like not being tied to the system, and we get to see people with dreadlocks who are playing ukuleles and all this stuff. Right,
they really seem out of a different decade in this movie, don't they?
I say that with absolute reverence for people who make that choice. Like I'm as a picket fence guy, like that sounds great. But also, if you have
people with your 1.5 kids in your house and your lawn,
if you let's have a lawn cast at some point. If you want to live like that way, that's great. Like you should. The freedom, the economic freedom to do so, I think is really important. But Fern, as a person, seems utterly miserable doing this. She doesn't seem like she's happy in this life. Maybe that's the way I'm reading it. But I just think
she seems like a person who is just getting through the day. Like you have the odd moments, like in the when they're at the campsite, you have a few nice moments where she's going out handing out coffee. Where like again you have those human interactions. The big van dweller jamboree they have at the beginning. Quite a lot of the scenes with David Strathern.
So what you're saying is
in the middle and further on, other people. And you are right. When she's on her own, I do think that she's quite. You see, there's a lot of scenes of Fern just doing the job, just getting on with it, but I think that's maybe like a fault of the movie for maybe not showing you enough of her. Do you know what I mean? The bits of life that she enjoys.
So are you saying like Fern interacting with other people made her a bit happier, or are you saying the opposite?
No, what I'm saying is that like a lot of this movie, it's just Frances McDormand on screen in a van driving, or she's going through some crisis. And like what I'm saying is that the movie could have maybe shown us more of, the scenes where she sees her friends or she meets a new person, or even with that kid that she meets for the second time, like she has a nice, like a human connection with somebody. And like, those are the moments that like my head for this character is those are the moments she lives for, is like when she has a person-to-person interaction with a stranger, and like they both gain something from that, whether that's from an emotional point of view or whatever. And like the rest of it is just life. Like, you go into work and just no one wants to go to work, but you're going to work because that then affords you. That's the same for Frances McDormand. It's just a job, and therefore she's just switched off and she's just getting through it.
But she doesn't get any. I struggle to see the benefit for her. Like she doesn't seem to have the upside of this lifestyle, in that she's not particularly financially secure. She doesn't seem very happy, and she gets to have to deal with all of the problems that come with your car breaking down or whatever else. I mean, again, it's an interpretation, and that's kind of what the point of movies are, is how you, especially a movie like this, is how you kind of view it. But
well, like you guys said, I think maybe that you are right, and that the movie could do a better job of maybe explaining why she's driving a van around the country, and like the economic reasons why she can't afford to get a house, especially in the beginning, because it's obviously a decision she makes. And later on, especially, it's like when she talked to her sister, I think that's when she decides that she wants to be a van dweller. Whereas earlier on, I think it's much more something that's been forced upon her.
This is something we've touched on before in a previous movie podcast. I can't remember which one, but basically we touched on sort of, and I don't mean any offense here, but we touched on sort of like that American sort of mindset, and that like the
offense.
The Pursuit of
Pursuit of
Happiness.
Happiness. Yeah, thank you, Sam. And essentially, that even though, like, 70% of Americans believe that to succeed in life, the game, the deck is stacked against them, essentially. So 7 to 10 people believe that it's unfair against everyday people, but 90% believe they can overcome the odds. Do you know what I mean? And I made that equation. Like, it's like going to a casino and, like, knowing the odds are against you, I'm going to clean out the blackjack table. And I think there's a little bit of that with Fern, and
I think it's worse, Ross. It's like it's like the Battle of the Bulge. It's like, I won't get shot. Everyone else gets shot, but I won't get shot. I'm gonna kill Hitler.
But and like, I think with Fern, it's a case of where it's maybe she feels that, and again, this is sort of like, like Sam said, we're sort of like, it's our interpretation, but I feel like she doesn't want to admit that sort of type of defeat, which is why she does like a financially sort of, that's seemingly the wrong decision for her van, of getting that loan to pay for an old van that's only going to have worse problems, because it's that American sort of mindset of, I can do it if I just believe hard enough, And I'm not saying, Fern is, not smart by any stretch of the means, but I think that, the American sort of like mindset plays a lot into that.
Whereas this is about, for me, this is like the failure of the American dream.
Mm-hmm.
This is mega corporations making billions while workers can't afford basic amenities like housing. Like we're not talking about. And again, there's choice.
Spoilers. That is the American dream. The trouble is that Americans don't see that as a problem because they're all striving to be that rich white man.
Yeah.
Well, no, but the other problem is that because the corporations are treated like humans with rights, but also that they don't have to pay tax. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ross, if you're rich enough, you don't have to pay taxes. That's the paradox of corporations.
Yeah.
If you've got enough money, it's cheaper just to hire a really good tax person and then not pay them.
Yep.
So I think like we should maybe move on to some of the production of this, but as a summary, I think there's like it's about, this film's about like the nobility of the working poor. It's about their resilience and their ability to like against the odds, but at the same time it's that fragility, except we're not really going to talk about why, and there's all these things that are kind of wrapped up inside it. But this is based on a book. This is based on a non-fiction book by a journalist who I can't find. Maybe you could have a look while I talk.
Isn't it Surviving something?
Yeah, I can't remember the author's name, but it's basically this. So this is a non-fiction book. It's a piece of journalism about the writer who lived in vans with these people. Interestingly, Zhao and McDermott also did the same thing. They, for 4 months, they kind of lived and had the van life. Now, never mind the thematic stuff that we've got into, I think, but like the actual physicality of this movie is stunning. The cinematography, the way that we have, real people as the cast, like everything feels like it is so loved and so cared for, and every single shot is just wonderful. There's so much of the production of this that I just adore, and I wonder if that's maybe what helped tip the Oscar win as well.
I think so. I think the Oscars is always tilted towards a movie that, what's the word, like I said, is visually arresting. Did Avatar win an Oscar? That's an odd question to ask in the middle of a podcast, but wanted you to call that out while I talk. And a movie like this where, the plot isn't a plot. We don't have like a start, a middle, and an end, like in a traditional movie. We don't have a 3 or 5 act structure. We kind of just have things happening, and then like a lot of it doesn't connect. But it's very, very pretty. It makes you feel, and McDormand, I think, is like absolutely deserving of the Best Actress win. Like I'm sure you guys agree. I think she's absolutely amazing in this. Considering the movie is mostly like looking at her face for 2 hours. I was reminded of I don't know if you guys saw The Revenant, the Leonardo DiCaprio Not
Yeah, I
that
know
this
what you're
movie
talking about.
shares a lot in common with that, but that
Like,
movie,
where is he going with this?
that movie is Leonardo DiCaprio like going through physical like pain, crawling through the American wilderness. This movie is about Francis McDormand going through emotional pain, driving through the American wilderness.
Good
Like
save.
there's a lot in common. I genuinely believe that, and like there's a reason that this movie made me think of that movie, which is about a guy getting mauled by a bear, and it's very, very different. But
Well,
like the bear in this movie is capitalism.
yeah. This is a Western, though, isn't it? Do you not think this
It
is a
is
Western?
absolutely, and not just
And
because it all takes place in the desert, but
no,
like
but
it's a road movie. This is a road movie.
the themes, the themes that we've already talked about, the way that it's shot, like we get the landscape shot. There's a shot when she's in one of the camps and she's kind of walking through, and Linda May says, "Oh, come and sit down, come and sit down." She says, "Oh no, I'm going to take a
No, I'm
walk."
just going for a walk. Yeah.
And we have this sunrise in the background, and there's just this lovely handheld shot of just following her along, and you just see it's literally just her walking, and there's kind of like there's people doing yoga in the background. There's all of this apparatus around her, which feels, again, like it feels like a documentary. It feels like this was happening, and they thought this is a great time to shoot at 6:30 in the morning or whatever it is when everyone.
Yeah, but like the best looking documentary you've ever seen in your life.
Seen in your life. So there's the cinematography of this and the way that they managed to entirely direct that to the overall feel of the film in a way that it's not jarring. We don't get lots of snap zooms of things. Everything feels on the same level. It feels sedate. It feels so natural. Mark Kermode described this as ambient, which I think it's a great piece of criticism, actually. Like, this is an ambient movie. This is just about taking it all in and just feeling what the people are feeling. And you get so much of that from like the way it looks, and that ability, I think that ability to really connect that to the overall story, I think is genius. It's total genius. And I'm surprised it didn't win Best Cinematography as well, to be honest.
Yeah, it's you really stumped me there, Sam, when you stopped talking.
What is wrong with you guys? You want to wake up a little bit?
I think we're just in awe of your voice, Sam, and the things that you.
I'll just keep talking then.
The audible chocolate that is Sam Jordan. Speaking to you tonight.
When
you're talking about cinematography, Sam, there was one scene that stood out to me, and it's when she goes back to her, to the now devoid city of Empire, and she goes to the old factory where her husband worked. And, you see all the dust accumulated and like, everything's left there. Printers, PCs, everything. And it's like, what, how did they leave in just such a state? We're just like up and out.
It's like Chernobyl.
It's like a Western ghost town, to tie it back into the Western theme.
Yes.
Because it's the same economic like imperative there, where in the American in cowboy times, as we'll call it, that's the historical term. In cowboy times, it was gold mining, and when the mines, when there was no more gold, they didn't bother knocking the town down and moving it. They just moved out
to prop up a new town. Yeah,
exactly. And it's the same here, and it's the same today. Where I am certain that Russia and China, like the big empty spaces in Russia and China, are absolutely full of these ghost towns as well. Of like,
careful, comrade.
Well, I mean, China literally is full of ghost cities just to keep people busy, but that's a separate conversation for a separate podcast.
I do want to hear more about that. But
like,
back to my point. After that point, then of she leaves the factory and she goes to her to her old house then, and she looks through and there's a bedroom, and then there's this one bit then, because this is referenced earlier in the movie where she's talking to a friend. She says if you look out, we'll sit in her backyard and you can see for miles and miles. You see the desert and the mountains, and then you see that shot that she described. She walks out her back door,
such
and just
cool
walks
shot.
and you see the plains, and then those like miles and miles out. You see those mountains, and you see the clouds, and then you see more mountain above the clouds. It was gorgeous.
Yeah.
America is a staggeringly beautiful country, isn't it? I'd love to. I've
really
been to New York, but I've never been that far west. But I think it would just be like, just as an aside, this movie really, it evokes this feeling that I've had since I was a kid, which is kind of like this real yearning for exploration. and almost this disappointment. And it's insane because traveling west was fucking awful. If you didn't die of dysentery, there'd be thousands of other ways to die. But like this real yearning for exploration and a real sadness that I was born too late. That there's nowhere to explore, and I'm not going to be able to go to Mars and like that. This feeling that this movie really like brings to me, I think is lovely. It really supports again the what the film's talking about, but also just the landscape and everything. It's wonderful. It's wonderful, and it feels like a documentary as well. So you get to really kind of immerse yourself in that.
Yeah. Again, coming back to it being a road movie, that like, this is really, I think, like a modern Western, and I'm not sure we'll remember this particularly fondly in a couple of years, or even talk about it. And I'm certainly probably not going to watch it again.
Ooh, that's harsh.
Is it though?
No, I'm with Dave.
This is the best picture curse. Is like, how many best pictures do we look back on and go, well, that's a movie I can watch every year? And I'm not saying that as a bad thing, because I liked this movie. I enjoyed the experience of watching it. But really,
Dave are on the same
really,
page
are these visuals going to bring me back?
Exactly.
Or am I going to watch half an hour of it and think, actually, all of the really amazing visuals are at the end, so I'm not going to sit through an hour and a half of this to get there.
Google image Nebraska.
Exactly, Ross. Exactly. But I would like. There's two things I want to talk about still, because we haven't really talked about David Strathairn, and I kind of want to get into that and get you guys' opinion on a couple of things. Before we do that, we want to talk about like. What do you think the arc for Fern is in this movie? I'm going to say what I think, and I want to know what you guys sort of like think as well, because we kind of don't get much of it until the very, very end. And I think I'm not sure how much of this is stuff that I've made up in my mind since I finished watching the movie, a couple of glasses of wine deep on Saturday evening. So like, it feels like the start of the movie, kind of up until when she goes to Dave's house, is kind of like her just doing things. She's just working, she's just getting by, she's just driving around. You have the thing at the sisters where she has that argument with the brother-in-law's friend about like, he's like, oh well, everyone needs to buy a house and blah 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 blah. And she basically has like not even that, but she has like no, actually, not everyone has to conform to your worldview, that like we all must own houses and be part of this like corporate system. And she has that nice rejection, but it almost feels like a revelation to her that she's saying these things in that scene. Like she hasn't, directly thought about it. And that's compounded again when she goes to Dave's house and she struggles with staying indoors. And he says, in the most off-putting way possible, I really like you. We're both 60 years old. Would you like to come and live with me? Again, we'll get into that when we talk about David Strathairn.
I can't tell you how I know, but that's pretty spot on. It's a weird. Honestly, I won't say on this why I know, but it's a weird thing for the old, like people from our parents' generations, seeing them like court one another again, and like, oh my god, you're like teenagers. What are you doing? Like some of this, I'm like, what is going on? Like, oh, I like you. Like that's. I was like, yep, nailed it.
But maybe that's a bit of truth in this movie. Like it's hard to know because like since the older generation, so us as young people, we don't see it because like we only see the TV version where they're all suave and like accomplished. But that's not really what I want to get into here. We'll save that for the David Strathairn conversation.
Yeah.
Go on, Sam.
So well the arc. We maybe touched on it a wee bit, but I think for me the arc doesn't resolve. It doesn't resolve for me for Fern. Yeah. We see her unhappy at the beginning. We see her a bit happier when she's with other people, a bit more happy when she's with Dave, and then at the end she's like, doesn't seem particularly happy, but she's going to drive off in a van. So I think we get like half an arc, and then it just goes, nah, we're not really interested in resolving
the important
that.
emotional moment is Swanky. Sharky.
Street Sharks. The only one, see?
Swanky's funeral at the end and like her conversation with Bob, I think is like the emotional crescendo of this movie. Like, not that it really is, but hear me out here.
Well, but that's not about her. That's about Bob and Swanky. So that's the bit that I'm confused.
No, but we do have a scene.
It is about her though.
It is about her because
she's still grieving her husband,
and she says this to Bob, and I think that's. I think Bob's bit is like, as good an actor as Frances McDormand is, I think that this actual guy having a really emotional moment is so powerful that
if that turns out not to be true for him, I'll be surprised.
Get this guy in Hollywood. He's good.
Raw. It was raw.
But I think that's so powerful, Sam, on like such a primal level that it overshadows the Frances McDormand lines before it, where she says basically like, you know, that, and she's just coming to that realization that like, you know, oh well, my husband died and I do miss him, and it was like the death of her life there, and then when the town closed, it was like he never existed, and I think that's like a go on,
Sam.
Can I just come in on a really, really staggering fact? Bob Wells' son did die. He'd only told about 20 people about it until he said the line in this movie. Isn't that
good God?
Wow?
What bravery!
And honestly, like that, like I said, I think that's maybe why like it kind of buries the lead for the Fern character, because like acting's all well and good, but like this guy is just
genuine, like raw sort of pain. That's what it is.
It's really hard to vocalize just exactly how like you can really feel his hurt, and so that overshadows Frances McDormand, who literally has 3 Oscar awards for the best actress for
for Pet and cast here. Imagine being in that man's shoes, because presumably, I can only assume they did more than one take. So he's having to recite that line, and like you see,
it very much looks, Ross, like that's a not composite shot, but it's 2 different shots. I think he's just in front of the camera there. I don't think that's. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that like hits him and Frances McDormand doing a scene. I think they got him in front of the camera. He said the line once, and then that's what we see in the film.
Okay, good.
Well, yeah, I mean, however they got it, I think it does. Yeah, it's a really powerful ending to the movie, isn't it? And it kind of like, but I would say though, like it's Bob Wells's powerful ending to the movie.
No, I agree, Sam. I'm not quite finished. Sorry, we keep talking about Bob Wells again because it's so powerful. But I do want to talk about Frances McDormand and the Fern character.
No, Bob Wells. So,
and she has this scene, and her emotional arc then is that she discusses this with Bob, and again they have this really like intimate moment where he tells her something really painful in his life, and she maybe feels like empowered to be like, yeah, actually, you know, this is why I feel that. And the husband is quite a looming presence in this movie because we never meet him and we never really like hear much about him. And, you know, and so she feels like she said, she feels like when Empire closed, she got in the van and she started driving, and she feels like that's the end of his life, and that he died years ago, but like that's when he died because their life together was gone. And then when she goes back to Empire, that's kind of like the cathartic sort of, she gets rid of all her old shit, and it's like, and so actually I found the ending to be somewhat uplifting for her character, because then she drives off, which, yeah, again, she's just driving off to some other shitty fucking Amazon job where she's gonna have to piss in a bottle, but like it's with much more of a like what's on the horizon outlook, as opposed to this woman who's been quite emotionally weighted down for this movie.
See, Dave,
I'm done now. So we
no, fair play. I just think
it's a good summary.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very poignant. The only thing is though, like, and this is the last point, then, the sort of like, you know, evoked sort of like emotions from me, is because when I'm thinking about what is next for her, because she's only going to get older. Like you heard her, like in one of her scenes with that cowboy character, Derek, her knees are starting to give out in her. That van's not going to get much better. And it depresses me a little thinking about what the future for Fern holds. She's got maybe 2-3 years in it before her life takes a very bad turn very, very fast.
Well, look at Swanky, who died at 75,
exactly.
which is substantially lower than life expectancy should be, you know, in America. So I kind of agree. Like I really appreciate your view on that, Dave. I think it's a really, really I think it's really well put.
Valid,
I'm not saying the movie couldn't have done it better.
No, hold on. I'm not being critical because I think it's fair.
The two aren't mutually exclusive, yeah.
Yeah, but I think we're jumping back a little bit to that argument about, well, she goes to the next precarious work and she has to this just feels like a loop for her. Everything, she's never going to get that security. Now, again, maybe that's the picket fence syndrome of thinking, Christ, I want to be able to die and give my kids my house and all these.
I can arrange you dying, Sam. No problems.
There's all these things that are like going on there, but yeah, it's that arc. I think you're right. I think that is exactly what the film is trying to say. I think that again, though, the end of the movie really is mirrored. I mean, literally is mirrored. We get to see all the same things that we saw, which I think is nice. But to me, that mirroring and that arc suggests just a cycle. It doesn't suggest that there is an end point for her. That this is just a cycle.
No hope.
And she's going to repeating this cycle. Her car will break down again. She will.
And I suppose
someone will bang on her.
The argument there is,
again.
If that's somebody's decision and that's the way they want to live, is it a bad thing?
Yes.
And that then becomes like I think this is the argument that we're not going to be able to, conclude properly here because none of us are travelers or are van dwellers or are anything like this. And it's that kind of like, if you give people the freedom to do that, can you then berate them for choosing to?
Well, again, but then you absolutely corrective. But then you can make the argument then, like, how much of it is actual freedom when fucking the bank is defaulted on your mortgage?
When nobody will give you any money and you can't afford a house.
When you don't have a penny to your name, how much of it is choice and how much of it is choice?
How much? Yeah, absolutely. And that point,
that comes down to what the movie is telling us, and the movie doesn't really come down on either side of that.
It doesn't. And that to me, I think you've articulated it really well, Ross, because it is trying to glorify, I think, this lifestyle, because the people who make the choice to do so is great, but in terms of Fern's arc, and let's maybe talk a little bit about the acting in a second. Like we then are left with this, for me, sour taste, and I think it's actually, in that sense, it's quite a reactionary ending to the movie. Like, it's not I don't think it's a position of saying, well, what are we going to do about it? Like, they're not interested in that. They're really just displaying it, and in that act of just being neutral, we're kind of left with like, so now what? Like, now what? How do we resolve this? How do we resolve this as a society, as a culture? And how does Fern resolve this as an individual? Because it's not going to get any easier for her. Exactly. I don't think.
No.
We haven't really talked, though, I think, and I think you guys are happy to carry on. We haven't really talked about McDormand in terms of like how she manages to bounce off all of the other people that are around her, because I think that is the
she's a really, really excellent actor. I think it just literally comes down to that.
It is.
And good direction, I should add.
Yes.
Like, obviously, I think the important thing and the really impressive thing here is, like, acting is hard, sure. And method acting that we get in this movie. But like you said, Sam, largely McDormand is playing off, apart from Strathern, like, these people aren't actors, and I think that must be really difficult and direction-wise really difficult for McDormand to be like reacting to and kind of engaged with people who aren't actors, and
and it's that empathetic performance. That's what I think this is, and this is why I think it is stunning acting, because it's about empathy. Like, she's obviously got a character in her head that she has thought about and internalized. And then what we see is her ability to empathize with the people that she's acting against, that are just random people. There's the two women who are talking about a husband, and you say, you haven't taken your ring off. And like, it's very folksy, isn't it? And these women are obviously just kind of talking as they normally would. These feel like real people. And her reaction isn't the reaction of Frances McDormand. It isn't like, oh yeah, you're right, totally. Like, she is able to take a step back and be quite reserved. When Bob Wells, and again, maybe they shot in different places, but when Bob Wells is talking to her about the death of his son, she doesn't try and hug him. She doesn't say, "Oh, it's okay." Like, she is quite cold in a kind of, I don't mean that in a negative way, but she's not really particularly emotive, because that's not the character. all of these things I think tie up in, as you say, the direction, that ability to like create situations where Linda May feels just absolute comfort in her ability to do this. Swanky feels absolute comfort. Again, all real people who aren't actors, who just are able to like just be themselves, and maybe they tweak it a little bit, and maybe they have a little bit of, you know, oh, could you maybe try that line again, all these other things, but they still have that sense of comfort because of the empathy that comes from the director and you know, the lead actor. And I think that is, I'm not sure we've seen things like this. I'm not sure we've seen that type of movie making in very commonly anyway.
Certainly, and it's certainly like a type of movie that you see more of that in. I'm not really sure I have a lot to say about McDormand's performance other than it's outrageously good. Like, I'm just not sure, as usual, like there's not anything to pick apart. So what have we got really? That's our bread and butter. Now, talking of things to pick apart, can we talk about the David Strathairn character, his character in this movie? Because we can have a bit of fun with this. I think he has one of the more depressing arcs in this movie.
And it's a competition. Yeah, like because his son, him reconnecting with his son, and like, but then I think for me, the film ends very, very positively for him. He gets to come, absolutely. He gets pulled back into the living house.
I feel like he must be pretty crushed when Fern just leaves, like, because there is a lot in that moment when she comes to stay, and he's like, I really like you. Will you be my girlfriend? And she's like, clingy, I'm off.
But he's surrounded by, you know, he's holding his grandchild. Like, he's
yeah, for sure.
But, I don't know. I think
there's a lot of subtext going on there where, like, there's a very much a recognition of, like, part of, you know, well, the reason he wants Fern to come and live with him is, you know, he likes her and things, but I think it's also kind of like he's the only old man there, like. And it's not his home. It's not his house. He has no, like... Do you know what I mean?
He did say he discussed it with the family, and there's the guest house.
Yeah. Like, families are all loving and things, but I do think there's a certain amount of that, and Fern recognises it as well, that, like, when she sees the van and it's all broken down and you know, it's got a tarp over it and stuff, of, like, in order to, like, be a part of, like, this family and live there, and, like, this man has had to surrender quite a lot of his, like... What the movie tells us is kind of like the dignity and the nobility of van dwellers, and he's kind of had to give all of that up, like, wholesale, in order to, like, slot back into this family life. And again, I'm not sure that it is a bad thing, but the movie is certainly implying that, like, the reason Fern doesn't stay is because she isn't willing to do that. She isn't willing to surrender and, like, what's the word? To give up. And again, like, there's this weird tone in this movie about, like, this sort of, like, noble nature of, like, and the freedom and the surrendering to that she has at the sisters, and she rejects it there. And then later on at, you know, Strathairn's house as well, it's kind of like this, you know, no, I'm an individualist and I want to be out there, like, traveling around and sort of living my life on my terms and not on yours.
I think it sort of comes back with if you swapped David and Fern, like, you know, as the main characters, and, you know, you sort of had the movie end where David sort of moves in with this family, you'd feel good, you know, I mean, like, this old man that you know you'll have made a connection with, you know, he's got security now, do you know what I mean? Because he's only going to get older, and he'll have family there to help him out. And I think you know, and obviously security.
On somebody else's terms. And again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing in reality. I'm just saying this movie is telling you it's a bad thing.
I mean, yeah, you could make that argument. I mean, like, if you were to make that argument, well, if you were to make that argument, then, like, you know, Fern does the same thing. Do you know what I mean? She's got security in her van on her sister's terms. Her sister lent her the money, and it's different terms. Do you know what I mean? And it's, you know, obviously, if people want to hand in their freedom for, you know, a roof over the head, that's on them. If they don't, no problem.
They shouldn't have to, though.
Well, no, but
that's a general point. You know, you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to surrender to have a roof.
Does it come? Sorry, go on, Ross. Go on, finish.
I was just going to say, again, for me, it comes down to that sort of concern for the character, and, like, you know, David is going to be okay. presumably, he was in the hospital earlier in the movie. I had no idea who paid for those bills. So he has some coin.
Wasn't going near that.
Didn't even touch it. Didn't even touch it. Yeah, I thought we were going to see a bit of a different movie as well, like in terms of the American healthcare system. But oh well, we'll wait for the next one.
There's a different version of this movie, isn't there, where like all the characters kill themselves at various points to illustrate how bad capitalism is, and there really is.
No, because the hospital saves them, and then they have debt collectors hunting them down. That's the version of the movie.
Yeah, that's why he kills himself.
But the two characters, in Dave and Fern, they have the same basic thing of like living out in the wilderness. He seems a bit more stable, and I don't mean that in a prerogative sense, but he seems a bit more stable in that he is. He seems to have more jobs. Like he's a park ranger, and he works in various different places. And his choice is to like end that life and to kind of to take the stability, whereas Fern decides that she doesn't want to do that. And the film's not really making a judgment on either way, is it? And that's kind of maybe some of the trickiness of this. It's not really picking a side. It's not saying this is better than the other. But I don't see, I don't really see that as like a depressing thing for him, though. I think it's about making that choice, isn't it? And then Vern makes a different choice with different outcomes, and that might be viewed as, again, it's to that point of like neutrality that this film isn't really willing to pitch its wagon on either trait. It's kind of just, I think you said show and tell at the beginning, Dave, and that seems to be
this movie is all show, but it's like I said, it's all very shallow. Like, and this is why we're having this conversation, is because we've all taken maybe slightly different things from this movie, because like it's kind of like vague about what any of the characters, do you know what I mean, end up as, and the things that they go through like can be taken in multiple ways, because we are just watching something unfold. We're not necessarily being like told a story, and it's not delineating the points well enough for it to be like, oh well, she was sad then, and then she wasn't so sad, and then this happened, and then that happened.
I'll tell you what they end up as. I'll tell you what they end up as: homeless in San Francisco. That's where the story ends, or dead. That's where that ends. What else is there? Let's say Fern her knees don't get worse. Let's say her van fucking has the carburetor of the gods and it lasts. Where does it go?
How old is this van that has a carburetor?
Carburetor.
like we pretty much replaced carburetors in the early 90s in cars.
This van is from the fucking late 80s. Fuck you. Even with perfect health and even with the perfect van, she can only work to a certain age. Yeah. And then what?
And right, that is not a judgment on her. It's not a judgment on Dave or Fern or anyone else. It's a judgment on the system that is there.
Exactly.
And what does this movie not want to touch? It doesn't want to touch the why. It doesn't want to touch the system. So we're literally left with she drives off into the sunset, and the movie's like, job done. There we go. Move on.
You can all go home now.
Don't you feel warm and
except those who don't have homes, Ross? Suck.
But Pursuit of Happiness tried this as well, and that film was very much more like.
I think this is a better movie than Pursuit of
Happiness.
No,
I'm not.
Pursuit of Happiness, we should say.
Happiness. But what it did do, the film did try and say, it's okay. Everything's fine because this guy's a millionaire. This film's not doing that, but it's also not saying anything else of the way. So I think we're just, I'm left like, oh, that was that was fine, but where's the meat? And that's maybe unfair.
It's a salad movie for sure.
Salad movie.
Yeah.
You're like, that was great, but I want a cheeseburger.
Yes, I'm gonna get a double cheeseburger, and then I'm gonna buy a single cheeseburger.
McDonald's, pay us.
Speaking of corporate overlords,
the new Big Tasty now with bacon. Get yours at your nearest drive-through.
Ross, don't do the whole ad read for them without them paying us first.
Damn, you just gave away free labour, man. That's not.
God,
that's
only at Arby's.
Excellent.
Olive Garden.
Is there anything else we want to talk about this film? I feel like we're about to
The last thing for me is the
start
length.
a class war. So
A class war. Rage. I think just the length. This movie could have told the same story with the same nuance and tone, and you could have easily cut 30 minutes off it, and you would have rounded it out at about 90 minutes, which, as we all know, by the rule of Imaginary Podcast, is acceptable.
It's one of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not make movies more than 90 minutes.
unless
it's
take on the wrath of the podcasters.
Unless it's literally Goodfellas or Shawshank Redemption. Get the fuck out of here with your
Or Green Mile.
over 90. Or Green Mile's also very good. Yeah, we could list the movies for ages, Ross.
Or
but
Casino.
You get my point. Or Casino,
films
yeah,
longer than 90 minutes. Not an exclusive club.
But yeah,
Or Zack
definitely.
Snyder's cut.
This is a really fucking. That's several times 90 minutes, Ross.
Lord of the Rings.
But the final thought here should be: this is a movie I probably wouldn't have watched if it wasn't for doing for the podcast, because I would never have gotten through the first half hour. I was so bored.
Yep.
But I'm glad we watched it, and it was definitely an interesting conversation.
And
as
to me,
usual,
I genuinely am glad for watching it.
but this conversation is why I think I should be more receptive to movies like this. I should be willing to sit through nearly 2 hours of landscape shots, because we've all walked away with slightly different takes on this film, and it makes you think, and there's ideas to discuss. And how many movies have we watched where we don't talk about any of the themes of the movies?
Certainly not fucking Zack Snyder's Justice League, I'll tell you that.
No, we talk about cast. We talk about
How dare you?
We talk about production details. We talk about all these other, like, the mechanics of movies, not what the movies are trying to say. And I think it's great to be able to do that with, like, to talk about those deeper things a little bit and get real wanky and artsy. You love it.
I don't like it when I get political, Sam.
Liar.
Fucking, this is why are we doing this? Why are we doing this?
Just fucking rage for no reason.
But we will be back with a regular programming next week where we continue to watch movies that I dictate we watch.
God damn it! God damn it!
Oh, it's a good one though. It's a good one. We're gonna watch. Inside Man, which is a great movie.
Is that
about
your
a
pick?
bank robbery. That's my pick. Yeah. When we randomized it, all of my picks were first, like 1, 2, and 3.
I'm calling shenanigans. I'm calling shenanigans.
Because for the next 6 fucking weeks, I have to watch movies you two have recommended, which means I'm gonna have to watch 3 Rocky movies or whatever the fuck Ross wanted to watch.
Predator. I can't remember the other 2. I'll look through
Rocky. I said it just now.
Oh, excellent.
Rocky,
You're welcome.
Rocky, Predator, and Top Gun. 3 distinct movies with distinct genres.
I have never seen Top Gun. That's why I suggest it. I've never seen it.
You've never seen Top Gun?
It's just to balance out the wankiness.
To balance out the artsy wank, as you put it, Sam.
Yeah.
That's
right.
fair.
Let's end it there. Thanks a lot, guys, and we'll see you next week.
We'll see you next year for the Oscars.
In our bow ties and suits.
Absolutely. Filling seats. We wish.
See you later.
Bye.